So, last week, Premier Doug Ford announced a provincial election. This week, we're going to break down the election selection from a real estate and mortgage standpoint, of course. I'm Vaughan Zawadzki. This is Sean Humphries, and we're mortgage people. All right. Good to see you, buddy.
We're here.
I got a swivelly chair today.
Oh, nice. We're in the swivelly chair club then.
Yeah, I will try to sit still for everybody's viewing pleasure.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I mean, I think I don't love talking politics, but I definitely have some strong opinions about it. So I'm a little bit hesitant about it, but I think it's going to make a good episode because I think we see the world in similar but slightly different viewpoints. So I think it'd be a good discussion today.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it. We're not really here to talk about, the winners or who we think is going to win or monitoring polls. With that said, it looks like the PC is in a strong position or they wouldn't have called for this election, especially with the Liberal government in a real weakened position right now. And the NDP government seemingly as the least relevant as they have been for a while. I know that in Ontario, specifically in urban Ontario, the NDP has a pretty decent representation. But we'll see what happens for this election. I got a little graphic, and it's maybe too crazy small. But we're going to break down from each party's perspective what their main housing position is. The taxes and UF tariffs, we're going to kind of leave alone on this one. But wanting to go into that, I'll go over them quickly and then we'll discuss. So PC's promising $2 billion for water and wastewater infrastructure near housing projects. Ooh, sexy. The Liberals,
I'm excited.
Liberals to this one's pretty juicy, I thought. Plan to eliminate land transfer tax for first-time buyers and introduce phased-in rent control. And the NDP promised to accelerate infrastructure projects to keep jobs. Sean, I'll throw it to you to give first take on the whole thing, break it down by party, however you like to look at it.
I think I'll go by party. If I'm thinking of Doug Ford and the PC Conservatives, $2 billion towards infrastructure. As you said, it's a sexy, really headline grabbing thing. I think it's probably necessary. I question how much of this is already being spent on infrastructure, on wastewater. Totally. Is this something that we're already doing? Then that sounds good, but I would hope that they're already investing in wastewater infrastructure. I
may as well jump in there because that's my take on it. Is that Doug Ford called the election. He thinks he's in a strong position. So instead of promising something new, he's like, why don't I just write down on a sheet of paper what we're already doing? This budget's already spent. We're and wastewater. I'm like, we know that that's required. He could put also building highways because he's already committed to improving our transportation, metro links as well. So, it's basically like, this is what any government, doesn't matter what color, should be doing.
They should be spending on infrastructure. Number one, I think transportation is probably a little bit more has historically been a little bit more of a political topic. Do you want to invest in transportation? Not a big Doug Ford fan, but he's done really well with transportation and bringing more transportation available, specifically subway lines and infrastructure in that regard. We don't see eye to eye on a number of other topics, but I do want to give him his flowers for getting transportation built and subways built.
Don't forget that it was almost an overnight decision, the amount of power this guy wields. He brought paper bags back to the LCBO in like a blink. He promised it one day and boom, next time I was there, would you like a bag, sir? I mean, I'm already using reusable bags. They've conditioned me. So I don't know if it had a huge impact on my life, But
Right.
that's the kind of moves that this guy can pull off.
Well, imagine if he brought back plastic straws, right? And then you can have your 40 in the bag, in the paper bag, and a straw coming out of the top.
I mean,
You'd be set. Bring you right back to the 90s.
make Ontario great again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his that policy seems like something they're already doing. Anything else I think he's proposing around housing seems controversial. You know, if you want to throw the highway in, that Northern Bypass or Bradford Bypass, that's very controversial. So he's not really putting those things out front. That although he did say that if he's elected, he will be tunneling under the 401, which to me seems like the craziest idea that we could possibly do. I don't see how that helps for the amount of dollars that are going into doing that. How would that possibly?
I have no.
We
I
can
mean,
spend that way better on
is
different
that
projects.
even from the Elon Musk playbook? Like, I know Elon years ago was trying to tunnel under California to build a new highway. He's digging a
Yeah,
hole or whatever. So that seems pretty harebrained
that was
idea.
one lane that they were building. Like Elon was building. I forget where it was. I want to say Texas, but I think you're right. It was in California, and
Yeah, I
that
could.
never really got off the ground.
It's supposed to
I
be
think we could
under the
put that
ground,
into,
but
yeah, oh, yeah, we could put that into other transportation projects, other subways, other GO train, get people off the roads rather than allowing more building. I know people see it as like, oh, we need bigger and bigger lanes. Like we're already like 15, whatever, however many lanes wide the 401
it's
is, and
insane.
we need more lanes. Like,
Or buy
and
the
that's the problem.
407 or something. Do something with a.
Exactly. Like that would be a much better use of money. Buy the 407 and then people can drive on it, or put all the trucks onto the 407 and pay for their transponder fees. Like
Yeah,
that, it costs you
yeah,
way less money,
way
and
less.
that frees up so much space on the 401 to have commuter traffic go, or tax a certain, tolls or whatever, like whatever you want to make it an incentive or a fee to drive at certain times. That's going to be a much better use of taxpayer dollars than tunneling under the 401.
Probably right about that. So, like overall, I would say that the PC electoral platform to do with housing, it's a non-starter for me. I
Yeah.
don't think from their perspective that it needs to be.
Right.
So let's move over to the lib. Oh, is that
I
sort of
want to
your?
give it I want to give it a grade. I'm going to give it a C plus. I think they were already doing it. I think they've just done the bare minimum. It's a passing grade, but I don't think they're feeling in a position where they need to say anything extreme. They don't need to make any promises because, as you said, they're in the pole position here.
C plus. I'll go B minus. So we're pretty close on
Okay.
this one.
Okay.
Now, the Liberal Party, big promises here. What's your take here?
Well, canceling out the land transfer tax for first-time homebuyers and phased in rent control. I think number one, I think that's a juicy thing to do for, canceling land transfer tax for first-time homebuyers. Certainly is headline grabbing. It certainly does play to a certain crowd that may be leaning towards, between PC and Liberals. They may lean a little bit more liberal if that's going to be a promise that's made. I think that's good. I think anything we can do to make it easier for first-time home buyers. It's not as easy to buy a home as when I bought a home in mid 2000s, and certainly not for people to buy or rent properties even as it was in like the 80s or the 90s or any other decade previously. So if we can make it easier for first-time home buyers to get in, I think that's a great thing to do. You want to
Yeah,
react on that one?
I'm not sure about this, and I'm not really for these high taxes or these high land transfer fees. And in Toronto we pay double. It's a cash grab, but at the same time, what happens if you take that money away? There's a budget tied to it. Where do you put that? tax somewhere else? Where are we going to see increased
Mm-hmm.
taxes? You know, maybe they'll take it off the first time home buyers, but then they'll tax us to drive downtown Toronto, which is like, it's
Yeah.
probably coming. I don't know when. You know, London, England, they certainly, you have to have a specific license, paying a fee, paying a tax in order to drive in the city. I don't think that we're there yet. Like, we're probably a long way
No.
off of that. But, you know, if they remove from here, where's it going to come to on the other side? We've also seen the Liberal Party make a bunch of promises that they've been backtracking on. So I'd be really, buyer beware if this is what you're primarily voting for.
Mm-hmm.
I would be reluctant to place a vote expecting that you're not going to have to pay that big chunk of land transfer tax.
Yeah, there's no I think you'd have to believe in more than just the land transfer tax in order to do that. Like a rebate, whether it's a rebate, maybe they make the rebate a little bit bigger for first time home buyers, or but I think yeah, I agree with you. I think that money's got to come from somewhere. But maybe we save on other things.
Yeah.
I don't know, because like there's been a lot of other waste by the PC government, spending almost $1 billion to get beer in the liquor stores a year earlier. The highways that they want to
Or
build, the
the grocery
spa.
stores, or the Circle K, like
Yeah.
it's just
Like,
so
do we need
weird to
that?
go to a gas station. I don't think that we do need it. And,
We
I'm
didn't
not
need it
necessarily.
early either. We didn't need it a year early. We could have waited a year and have it in the stores now or whenever for free. But
Yeah,
we
so
spent
so
that
far
money
all
a
of the
year
PC
early.
policy seems to be built around what you can do about liquor.
Yeah.
We get the bags back in the liquor store, and we get liquor into the corner store. Like, well,
Yeah.
let's see what we can do with the infrastructure. Let's see them deliver on that.
Yeah. And then for the other piece, the rental, I know uh rent control, it sounds really good. But if you break down the economics of it, it actually makes rent more expensive for people.
Sure.
Ford brought in the same thing and then backtracked on it. It's a great thing to get elected on, but when you start looking at what it ends up being, it's more expensive for renters. It just raises the rent on it. And I don't want to get into the specifics of it. I'm not
Right.
prepared to
No,
do that.
I'm familiar with it, with the discussion around it. I think that what we need is, and I don't, when they say rent control, that's a very vague to begin with. Are we
Yeah,
talking about capping market rent? Because that's crazy to me.
right.
Or are we talking about building purpose-built rentals that are affordable, which I think that we need anyway. I think that
Yeah,
our labor force is just disappearing, especially the lower end of our labor force. I think that we need affordable housing in order to keep certain aspects of our labor force. So that should be government built, and then you can rent control that all
yeah,
day, all night, and have special qualifications for people there. That's kind of complicated. Um, Overall, on the Liberal platform, it's like, I just don't believe it. So I don't know what
mhm,
to give it for a grade, like a C minus. It
mhm.
looks really sexy, but when you start digging into it, oof, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you too. I'm gonna give it a B minus.
A little more
I'm
generous.
a little bit more generous with it. I think that the rent control, I would need more details on the rent control idea. I think that if I were, the Sean Humphries platform may involve some incentives for first time home buyers. Like if I'm a political party, I'm probably trying to attract some of that voting power from that group. Let's get some of those people in. The infrastructure for the government, I'm assuming that's already money spent. So maybe I'm tacking that on as well. The Liberals are going to do that because that's already money. That's maybe it's not 2 billion, but will the government spend 2
Right.
billion? Right. So I'm just thinking like this is a money already in there, and rent control. I can see that as being like a vote grabbing, but I would need to see more around that. I would love to see more around purpose built rentals.
Yeah.
And maybe getting in on some of the government of Canada's got a really good program right now. So how can we maybe exploit some of the money from the government of Canada to help build more more rentals, more affordable housing in Ontario.
Because we need it everywhere, and Ontario's we have the biggest population, so we definitely need it here. So we've got a B- from Sean, C- from me. Let's move over to the NDP party. I'll read that again because it's been a minute.
Yeah, bring that up again.
Yeah, let me just. Here we go. So the NDP position is they promise to accelerate infrastructure projects to keep jobs. I have a bit to say about this, but I want your take first.
I have no idea what that is. I mean, promise to accelerate infrastructure projects to keep jobs. That just seems like, okay, well, we're going to spend money on wastewater infrastructure near housing projects. Like it's the exact same thing, except for way more vague. Like I'm just not sure what they're getting at. Of course they want to do that. Of course they want to keep more infrastructure projects in the pipeline and they want people to have jobs. Great. Congratulations.
What I'm noticing here, and I like this actually, from the NDP, is to finally carve out their own identity. And I don't think that they've done a good job of it. I think that up to like very recently, their identity has been, we are going to be the party that spends. We are going to, it's going to be healthcare, it's going to be education, both things that I strongly, strongly believe in investing in. But it seems like they're an expensive party, right? When you campaign for 8 years, 10 years on spending money, that's frightening if you're a taxpayer that's already half of your income goes to the government, right? So to switch to a employment first, jobs first, and I've seen it in a couple of their other campaign, right? And I'm like, oh, now it seems like it's a sort of put Canada first perspective. Let's get everybody employed in a conservative sense. Like, conservative people typically believe we have to look after ourselves first. And so, they're not going to pull from a true blue conservative over to the Orange Party, but to say like, we're going to focus on keeping people employed, that's a way better message than we are going to focus on spending money.
Yeah, but should they be operating there? Like, like that's wide open green space for them. Like considering like the PCs on one side who are more business focused, the Liberals in the middle, like the NDP, if they're all the way on the left, like, I mean, that seems like where labor should be, but that labor kind of gets eaten up by the right now, it seems like. So I think like if you're going to be operating in that space, you should have a labor friendly platform. And I love it. Like maybe they should be doing like I would love to hear that idea fleshed out a little bit more of, okay, what does that mean? How does this support labor? How does this, infrastructure jobs? Okay, maybe the source that we're reading here is not doing them justice on what the platform actually is. But what does that mean for labor? And I can get behind that idea.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a change in branding for the NDP party, and I'm sure that this is like labor is a big part of who they are. I mean, they're very, very pro-union. I don't know that labor has to be necessarily designated as union or not union, but to be pro-labor, I mean, if we want to collect more taxes, have more people working, have more people with decent paying jobs. The government's taking half of it anyway. The more that we can employ outside of the public sector, the better. So pro-labor, I like it. You're right. I don't think that there's enough there to win an election. I don't think that there's enough there to really understand what their goals would be. But in general, I think it's a better message than we're going to spend all your money. So I would say
that's their housing platform, though, is like infrastructure, spending on infrastructure. That's the housing platform. Like, I just want to know more about.
Yeah, are we talking about?
I don't want to cut you off. What's your grade on this? Like, maybe you give me that.
Yeah, I always give it a general C. No plus, no minus.
Yeah, I'm incomplete on this. I think this is a D. I don't think that there's enough detail here for me to give it a grade, whereas the other two parties gave us, here's what their ideas are, and I think there's enough for us to get a sense of what the direction is. I think we're inferring on what the NDP is getting at, because there's just not enough detail, at least in this statement.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like a fledgling. It's like the beginning. It looks to me like the beginning of a rebrand or something like that. They're
Hmm.
maybe not in a position where they think that they can win an election, but maybe they can turn things around in a few years. They've certainly had some like leadership problems as well in that
I have
party,
no
but
idea who the leader is.
um, nationally, I know.
Yeah,
I haven't.
exactly. Yeah, nationally I know, but I don't federally for sure. But I'm not sure who the Ontario one is.
Yeah, I think it's
Ugh.
changed hands a little bit, and they
Yeah,
had some scandal there, so they're ready. Probably in a rebuild. Let's call it.
yeah,
If it
rebuild
was a
situation.
sports franchise, they're in a rebuild, which is good. Let's
I'm here for a sports franchise analogy. I love it.
there's some room in the middle and now I think that both parties are actually starting to move back into the middle a little bit. We've had a very sort of divided maybe 8 years or whatever politically, where
Yeah.
historically Canada's been center right, center left. It seems to have moved a little bit more drastic right, drastic left. Seems to be also now moving a little bit back into the middle, so that gap that they could jump into might be closing. So they're going to have to move quick.
Can I let me share something here. So let me just pop this up before we move on to the next topic, because I wanted to squeeze this in. But I think one of the things that Doug talks about is like being able to build more housing and get building starts happening. And my argument to that is that he really has not a lot to do with getting building going. I think the federal government has their program, and locally in the municipalities they have that. But really, building getting started has a lot to do with what the interest rate is and the cost of borrowing money, and then the cost of getting it constructed. So if you look at this, along the right side is, in reverse order, the interest rates. So the higher the interest rates get, the lower the poor market conditions are for home builder sentiment. So, the higher it was when interest rates were super low and we were starting to build a lot of properties. Getting as the interest rate went up, that sentiment deteriorated. And if we're going to go forward, as you can see, into kind of 2025, 2026, if interest rates are kind of going to be in that mid range, there's the word mid,
Mid.
4%, that's not like a super great area to like, oh, we got to build more housing because it's cheap. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought that was an interesting look. Because I guess where I'm going with this is that, yes, we can create the situation for home building. Infrastructure is important. It needs to be there to support these builders. But whether the builder decides to make, private homes, detached homes for end users, is more to do with the cost of building and less,
Definitely.
So
And
if things
interest
get
rates
more
are one
expensive,
factor, because there's a whole lot of other factors. When the cost of lumber went through the roof,
yeah,
and if these tariffs come into play, which it seems like in some capacity there are going to be tariffs come into play, it looks like it will be inflationary. It'll drive the cost of everything up. Which will potentially slow down building, even if interest rates plummet. To try to combat that, I think that there's going to be a real kind of feeling out, sort of, we're going to have to see where the dust settles on this stuff, but it's
yeah,
not going to incentivize building if the
no,
cost of
exactly.
everything goes up around it.
And I can tell you right now, Donald Trump has not thought of who the premier is of Ontario one time. He does not care who it is. It's not going to stop him from, no matter who it is. We could have, you know, I'm trying to think, whoever. I was thinking Mr. Dressup as our
Yeah,
premier,
I love Mr.
Ontario
Dresser.
reference. Exactly. He could be our premier, and it just would not make a difference to whether or not we're going to get tariffs in
No.
Ontario. And can he battle that? So the cost of building will go up if there's tariffs, if mortgage rates are higher, if inflation in the US doesn't come down. All of these costs together will make things more expensive here in Canada, in Ontario, and that's not going to make a difference to get building, no matter what Doug does or says.
No.
So in my mind, I'm not electing Doug because he can fight Donald Trump. I want him to fix the things that people are worried about: cost of living, the cost, the house, shelter cost, and healthcare. If he's not able to really do anything about cost of housing, then I want him to fix our healthcare system because
Sure.
it's broken right now. So great that you're going to put $2 billion into infrastructure, but let's fix the things that we can fix, because that's solely in his bandwidth.
Well, certainly the healthcare, definitely. Housing is, I think it's a. I mean, I won't say it's a little less complicated or a little more complicated. There's
For sure.
there's all a lot of bureaucracy that goes on there that I don't know how we lean that out. I'm not suggesting an Elon Musk style task force where you go slashing jobs. I absolutely hate the idea of taking people's employment away from them. I'll never support it. Maybe we can reallocate some resources. I'm not. I don't have the expertise in how to do that efficiently. But if there's a
Well,
government that could come in and reallocate resources so that we can improve healthcare, we can improve housing, that would be ideal.
we're putting money towards projects that, like $1 billion for corners beer and corner stores. You tell me that $1 billion couldn't help out the healthcare system a little bit?
Is this what it costs
No.
$1 billion to put
That's
beer in the gas
900
station?
million or something like that. And maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars that that costs to get it into a corner stores a year early,
Ridiculous.
versus putting into housing, putting into healthcare, the things that people actually care about, and not just headline grabbing. I want to get reelected.
All right, let's. Yeah, there we
Good.
go. Yeah.
Deep
No,
breath.
I agree. I think you have
Did you
some
want me to
data.
tee up this one?
Yeah, tee this one up for us, Sean. I know you had some ideas that we can
Yeah,
roll
let
with.
me get my next slide here ready. Okay, so
I
we're
love that we have
talking.
graphics. We're really like evolving here in
Doing
front
it.
of everybody's eyes, just in real time, just growing up.
We're happening. Okay, so for the first time in 18 months, rent prices across Canada are dropping. After years of skyrocketing prices, tenants are finally seeing some relief. But what's behind this trend? Is this a temporary dip, or is this the start of a major shift? Is this going to be a renters buyers market? What's your take, Vaughn? What are you seeing out there?
Well, I looked at it. It was something like a 4.4% decrease in January year over year. So I'm like, okay, well, if your rent is $2,000 a month, that's $88. $88 a month back in your pocket is definitely not nothing. It's a part of an equation, right? So it's not like somebody went in and said, hey, we're going to save you $88 a month. It just so happens that right now, if you sign a lease, it's going to be on average less than it was the year before. We could all use a little break in that department. I think it doesn't make it a renter's market, but I think at the same time, if you're an investor or you're a property owner that provides that rental service, I don't think that $88 a month is killing you either. So I don't think it would de-incentivize you to invest in property for rental purposes. And I think that it's great if you're a renter. Maybe that's you can buy a little bit more steak this month.
That's what we need, right? I mean, maybe it puts a little bit more money in your pocket. I mean, it's not like it's gone down $88 per person that's renting. It's anybody looking to get a new, rental property. It might be a little less. But if you look, like if you haven't gotten a new rental property in 5 years, let me take a look at this. The cost of rent has still gone up 2.87% since January 2020. So it's not like people are moving every year, and well, maybe some people are, but I think the majority of people move every few years. And so it's probably still expensive for most people unless you moved, in January 2024 before. We've had a whole pile of foreign students leave Canada. We're cutting back on like bringing more people in. So I think this is a direct result of immigration policy, where we're not inviting as many people in. We're people that maybe were here before are not here. And so there's more supply when it comes to it. But if you look at the cost of right before the pandemic at $1,823 to where we are today, which is $2,100, this is across Canada. But that cost is still increased. Certainly, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's increased year over year 2.87%.
Yeah, and I think a big driver of the decline is from Toronto specifically are those condos that we've talked about nonstop. The condos that are still sitting on the market, the sort of one bedroom in the Bay Street corridor area in Toronto that investors are pulling out because they couldn't get rents for it. So that makes sense. That's the biggest single contributor that brings that number down are the condos. And really, based on what you said about the students and international students, that was largely who was populating those rental units. So there's a little bit of an adjustment that has to be made in order to bring that sort of just into balance and bring up the occupancy.
Yeah, and Ontario specifically has gone down 5.6%. We've got a big population here, so we're going to see, bigger swings, I would think, if we have large amounts of population leaving. But we're still in Ontario, we're still the second most expensive place to rent a condo apartment in Canada. So at $2,329, and we're second only to BC. So I think what you're saying is true. Ontario is, we're seeing that decline, but it's a cost of living, cost of shelter is still a very expensive piece of business.
It really is. I mean, and we talk about that every week, and the effects that has. Last week when we touched on the effects that it has on people's interest to move into this city to pursue other employment. That it could be a barrier. Well, it certainly is a barrier to a lot of people.
Sure.
If you were moving here on your own with no roommate, and you're staring down a $2,180 rental, you really need some decent employment to justify that expense.
I would assume people are looking at roommates. Our condo that's rented out right now is subletted by two roommates. It's a one bedroom plus den, so there is some room in there. But I think in terms of cost, like that's a great way to be able to minimize what that cost is. I think my rent when I was renting, it was like $900 at like the top end, right? Like for one person, that was still a lot of money, but it was manageable at that time.
And wages were around the same. Like we haven't seen wage growth come up to like drastically to offset that. So
I was making like nothing at that time. So that was like half of my income was going towards my rent. But you're right. Like we have seen, I think over the last couple years, it's been like 5% wage growth. So theoretically, do I have a slide? Let me see if I got a slide on that.
I would love to see
cost of living. I don't. So cost of living. Oh, here, let me share this one. So in terms of like the real home price index, which is a measure of home prices after inflation compared to 1980. So this isn't for rent, but maybe this is a good kind of thing to compare it to. You're seeing like, during the pandemic, when the prices of housing went way up, you're seeing that big spike where it was 4 times more than what it was in 1980. And now we've dropped back down to under 3 times more than what it was. And so that's the cost as a relation to how much you make and how much you're then spending on buying a home. So it has been going up. It's been going up fairly gradually, but then, those spikes, 2017 was one, 2021, 2022 was another one. And then we've dropped back down. And as interest rates come back down, we're seeing a little bit more affordability. Housing prices have come down. Investors have left the market for one bedroom condos. So it is more affordable right now than it was a couple of years ago. Anyway, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that would suggest that. Well, we know that it would be a decent time to purchase right now, especially those 1-bedroom condos. Because nothing's getting built. When you pulled up that earlier slide, it's flat. And if nothing's
Yeah.
getting built today, it means in 5 years, nothing new is coming onto the market. Nothing will be available. It's a big time problem. And maybe tying it back to the PC platform of investing in wastewater and that sort of infrastructure. Those are the precursors that you need in order to build communities. You need to have that sort of boring infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
We know that it's about 10 years that you need to start investing in that infrastructure 10 years before you're actually building properties on communities.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's a long-term strategy, which makes it intensely boring to pitch for an election campaign.
Yeah.
But
It's
if you know a thing
like,
or two, you know that it's required. So it's really it's a really positive thing to see that we're going to be investing
it's
in
like
the right thing.
the electric underwear of a housing strategy. Like nobody's actually going to see it, but it's something that you really need when it's cold outside.
And it's been cold.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, infrastructure is sexy. I think let's start that. Maybe we need some t-shirts made.
Hashtag at least, we'll
least
go
a
to
hashtag.
Instagram and but I don't see you supporting a pro PC infrastructure movement. But
I
I don't care
think
who the
they're already
government
doing
is.
it. I think they're already doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's any new, it's not net new money spent. It's like, well, let's just mark this down as, well, we've been spending it already. So I just don't believe that it's a net
And it's like
new
blue,
income.
red, orange. We need that infrastructure build. We need healthcare. We need education. It doesn't matter.
We better be spending money on those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple other topics, but we've been rambling on now for close to 40 minutes. Do we want to push that to next week? We were going to talk about the stress test as well. Should we bundle that up?
Yeah, I guess we can talk about. I mean, it's not super urgent at this point to talk about. We're going to talk about the TD exit, but let's talk about that next week.
Let's do that next week. I've enjoyed our chat today. I'm live here at the Royal LePage Signature office while construction goes on in my house. Who knows? Maybe we'll make it a regular thing.
Yeah. And can I just say, if you've enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, make sure you put your comments in the bottom. Vaughn and I read these comments and would love to hear what you're saying. That engagement really helps us. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and your help will help us get there. And we hope you're enjoying it. And Vaughn, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I certainly did. I hope we're still friends after this in terms of our discussion, which I know we are because we have a good, solid conversation. What do you think?
Wouldn't have it any other way, buddy.
Absolutely. All right, guys. See you next week on the Mortgage People Podcast.